Imagine walking home after work, when suddenly a 25-foot wave races toward you. But it isn't water. It's millions of gallons of molasses. It sounds impossible. Yet this unbelievable disaster actually happened in Boston, killing innocent people and leaving an entire city in shock forever. This is the incredible true story of the Great Molasses Flood, one of the strangest and deadliest disasters in American history. But to understand how this happened, we first need to visit a quiet neighborhood where one enormous steel tank changed everything. Standing nearly 50 feet tall, the massive tank held over 2 million gallons of sticky molasses waiting silently above the neighborhood. Neighbors often heard strange groaning sounds coming from the tank, but no one imagined it was about to become a deadly time bomb. Workers noticed dark molasses leaking from the tank almost every day. Instead of repairing it, the company simply painted the tank brown. The fresh paint covered the stains, but it couldn't hide the dangerous cracks growing deeper inside the aging steel walls. Children even collected dripping molasses in small cans, treating it like a sweet gift, completely unaware of the deadly danger above them. Then came January 15, 1919. A surprisingly warm winter afternoon placed enormous pressure on the already weakened steel tank. At exactly 12:40, witnesses heard a deep metallic roar echo across the neighborhood. Then everything changed within seconds. Without warning, over 2 million gallons of molasses exploded into the streets, creating a deadly wave no one could outrun. The massive wave surged through Boston at nearly 35 miles per hour, faster than most people could possibly run for their lives. Within seconds, buildings splintered apart, wagons flipped over, and people disappeared beneath the crushing weight of the thick, sticky flood. Unlike water, molasses trapped anyone who fell. Every movement became slower, turning escape into a desperate struggle for survival. Horses pulling delivery wagons became trapped almost instantly, unable to free themselves from the thick, relentless sea of molasses. Rescue workers rushed toward the disaster, only to discover that every step into the sticky flood made rescuing victims painfully difficult. By the time the wave finally stopped moving, the neighborhood had become almost unrecognizable, buried beneath a thick layer of molasses. Rescue teams worked tirelessly, but the thick molasses clung to everything, turning every rescue into a heartbreaking race against time. Some victims were rescued alive, while others remained trapped beneath the heavy syrup, impossible to reach before it was too late. By the end of the disaster, 21 people had lost their lives, and more than 150 others were injured. Homes were destroyed, businesses collapsed, and families spent days searching for loved ones in streets buried beneath sticky brown debris. Cleaning the city proved almost impossible. Workers used seawater, sand, and countless hours of labor to remove the hardened molasses. Even months later, people claimed they could still smell sweet molasses lingering throughout Boston's North End on warm afternoons. As rescue operations ended, one difficult question echoed across Boston. How could a massive steel tank suddenly explode without any warning? Engineers soon discovered alarming evidence. The tank had never been properly tested before it was filled with millions of gallons of molasses. Some reports suggested the steel walls were too thin, making the enormous tank far weaker than it should have been. Witnesses remembered hearing strange groaning noises for months, clear warning signs that something was terribly wrong long before the disaster. Families demanded answers, refusing to believe this tragedy was simply an accident. Public pressure forced a full investigation into the company's actions. What followed became one of America's most important legal battles, changing how companies could be held responsible for public safety. The company insisted the disaster was completely unpredictable. But investigators uncovered evidence suggesting the warning signs had been ignored for months. Engineers carefully examined broken steel plates, damaged rivets, and construction records, searching for the truth hidden beneath twisted pieces of metal. Survivors bravely shared what they had witnessed, describing the deafening roar and the terrifying wall of molasses rushing through the streets. After months of testimony and technical analysis, the investigation concluded that preventable failures had contributed to this devastating tragedy. The legal battle became a landmark case, reminding industries that public safety could never be treated as an afterthought. The disaster forever changed engineering practices, inspections, and accountability, helping prevent similar industrial failures across the United States. For the families left behind, the disaster wasn't just a headline. It became a painful memory they would carry for the rest of their lives. Survivors described the terrifying silence after the waves stopped, broken only by desperate cries for help echoing through the ruined streets. Volunteers from across Boston came together, risking their own safety to rescue strangers trapped beneath the heavy, sticky flood. Their courage reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, compassion can shine brighter than fear and destruction. Boston slowly rebuilt its streets, but the memories of that strange and devastating day remained deeply woven into the city's history. More than a century later, the Great Molasses Flood remains one of America's most unbelievable true stories, and one of its most important safety lessons. In the years that followed, engineers across America began paying far greater attention to safety, inspections, and structural design than ever before. Governments introduced stricter building standards, making companies prove that large industrial structures were safe before they could begin operating. The Great Molasses Flood became a lasting reminder that ignoring small warning signs can lead to unimaginable consequences. What seemed like harmless leaks eventually exposed dangerous mistakes in engineering, management, and corporate responsibility. Today, this extraordinary disaster is still taught in classrooms as a lesson about accountability, engineering, and the importance of public safety. More than 100 years later, the story continues to remind us that every safety rule is often written because someone once paid a terrible price. The Great Molasses Flood wasn't caused by nature. It was a human-made disaster shaped by poor decisions and overlooked warning signs. Looking back today, many experts believe this tragedy might have been prevented if proper inspections and stronger engineering standards had been followed. Every victim had dreams, families, and plans for the future. In just a few terrifying seconds, everything changed forever. History remembers disasters because they teach lessons that future generations cannot afford to forget. More than a century later, the Great Molasses Flood continues reminding us that responsibility can save lives long before disaster strikes. Sometimes, history's strangest disasters become its greatest teachers, leaving behind lessons far more valuable than anyone could have imagined. More than 100 years have passed, yet Boston still remembers the day an ordinary afternoon became one of America's strangest tragedies. The victims were ordinary people. Workers, children, firefighters, and families whose lives changed forever in just a matter of seconds. Their story reminds us that every engineering decision carries real human consequences, far beyond steel, concrete, or business profits. Today, countless safety inspections exist because history has repeatedly shown the devastating cost of ignoring even the smallest warning signs. The Great Molasses Flood wasn't just a bizarre disaster. It became a lasting lesson about responsibility, accountability, and protecting human lives. History remembers the Great Molasses Flood not because of the molasses itself, but because every life lost deserves to be remembered. If you enjoy true stories that shaped history, consider subscribing for more documentaries uncovering America's forgotten past.